Transformers, a franchise I'm sure we've all heard about, starting back in the 1980s to sell toys. It's about large alien robots who are at war who transform into vehicles. Most of the time, that is. Ever since the original series, the fandom has grown in popularity significantly. The storyline has expanded over multiple different stories, both in the shows and comics, each building off each other and some creating completely different storylines than others. When you think of Transformers, you're likely thinking of the live action films directed by Michael Bay. These live-action films, often referred to by Bayverse within the fandom, were very popular and advertised heavily. You likely remember some of these silly advertisements as well. These films were even my introduction to the franchise. I myself adored the live-action films back when I first saw them, but looking back at them, they are rather questionable. For one, there's also this scene.
Whoa, nice headers. You've got a high-rise double pump carburetor. That's pretty impressive, Sam.
Double pump?
It squirts the fuel in so you can go faster.
Oh. I like to go faster.
And it looks like your distributor cap's a little loose.
Yeah?
Even if I say most of these live action films have been rather questionable, there are two of these films that make it into my favorites, that being Bumblebee and Rise of the Beasts. Looking back on it, this began a trend of the movies happening further and further before each other. For example, Rise of the Beasts takes place before the Transformers film 2007, while Bumblebee takes place before all of the films. Another thing that we can note is that Michael Bay had stepped back from being a lead in the production for these films as well. Now that we have the general background down, we can finally make our way to the meat of the story. Transformers 1. Oh boy, Transformers 1 is the most recent movie to come out and hit the big screen for the franchise, and it just might be one of the best Transformers films to come out. Especially ever since the fan has been begging for a movie that's centered around the Transformers rather than Transformers and humans. We finally are getting this origin story, the look of life on Cybertron, and everything before the war, before Earth. I know I've already said Rise of the Beast and Bumblebee were some of the best movies, but Transformers 1 topped that for me. Within the first few weeks of the movie coming out, I've already managed to watch it 3 times in theaters, and I would have gone more had I been less anxious to drive. Transformers 1 is intended to be the prequel to all the movies before it. So, again, repeating that this next movie comes out before all the other movies trend that we've seen before with Rise of the Beast and Bumblebee. And in order to do this, the writers took inspiration from many different Transformers media that have come out at this point, pulling from the IDW comics and Transformers Prime for the origin story of D16 and Orion Pax, and Generation 1 for their designs in the films. The inspiration that they took for these continuities differs. For example, the IDW comics have always focused more on the Transformers themselves, their struggles among each other, rather than the Transformers and humans working together, especially in the More Than Meets the Eye comics and the Lost Light comics. This is likely where they drew inspiration for Megatron's origin as a miner, and they applied this to Orion or Optimus Prime as well. This is also noted in Transformers Prime, where they go on to explain Optimus Prime's and Megatron's backstory, saying how Megatron was a miner and a gladiator, while Optimus Prime was a archivist. This is a clip from Transformers Prime detailing the backstory between Optimus Prime and Megatron.
Do you recall when I mentioned that Optimus wasn't always a Prime? Well, he wasn't always Optimus either. He was once a clerk in the Iacon Hall of Records, named Orion Pax. But as he learned more about Cybertron's past, he grew increasingly concerned about the present corruption in high places and inequality among the masses. Orion became inspired by the words and ideas of a gladiator one who had named himself after one of the 13 original primes, Megatronus. Megatronus vowed to challenge Cybertron's leadership and demand that all Cybertronians be treated as equals. This gladiator turned revolutionary rapidly gathered a loyal following.
In this film, they don't make Optimus an archivist. Rather, they keep both Optimus and Megatron as minors, and they also seem to have stripped Megatron of his gladiatory origins. Though at some point, they do reference it in the movie. Then we move on to the art style. The movie is heavily referencing the original G1 designs, likely for nostalgia from the early 1980s kids who adored the show. It is still extremely popular within the fandom. A lot of people look back on these designs saying that they were likely some of the best designs they made. They also heavily referenced Art Deco style for the film's location itself, using this style to create the architecture for Cybertron, the planet itself, as well as all the buildings in Iacon. Okay, but what about the movie itself? The movie follows the story of Orion Pax, aka Optimus Prime, D16, who is Megatron, Elita 1, and B-127, who is known as Bumblebee, working together on a mission to find the Matrix of Leadership to restore Energon on the planet of Cybertron. Energon, in all continuities, if you don't know, is the fuel and lifeblood of Cybertronians, the Transformers. The planet had stopped producing this vital resource when the 13 original Primes died, leaving behind Cybertron's current leader, Sentinel Prime. The 13 Primes died in the war for Cybertron with the Quintessons, a rival alien species we don't learn much about in the film. This then led to the Matrix of Leadership disappearing, and without the Matrix of Leadership, Cybertron no longer produced Energon. Now, just in case you don't know, let me summarize who the 13 Primes were. The 13 Primes were the first Transformers created by Primus, the Transformers god, pretty much. Primus is also the planet the Transformers live on, having given up his life force to transform and become the planet to house all the Transformers. Back to the movie's plot. Orion Pax and D16 are good friends who work in the mines together, alongside Elita 1 and later B-127. Orion has been obsessed with finding the Matrix of Leadership, and later, once he discovers an old distress signal, ventures to the abandoned surface of Cybertron with D16, B-127, and Elita 1 to search for the artifact. However, during this time, we watch as D16 slowly becomes Megatron as they learn more and more about the truth behind the disappearance of the Matrix of Leadership. Then, the eventual betrayal between the two that would lead to the Autobot-Decepticon war we all know. The movie isn't without its flaws, however. It is beautifully crafted and visually stunning. Sometimes the comedic quips from B-127 don't land perfectly, but he does provide a good amount of comic relief throughout the movie. My biggest personal issue with the movie is the pacing. The climax feels rushed, and the turn of D16 to Megatron could have been drawn out slightly had the movie had a longer runtime. But it isn't terrible. Despite that one flaw, the movie is perfect in my eyes. The emotional buildup still hits just as strong, even if it feels rushed. Every time I rewatched that movie, that scene was just, I can't even describe it. It was like mind-blowing. It's a great movie, and I guarantee you'll enjoy it. So, if you haven't given it a try, go and watch it. Sadly, at this point, it's no longer running in theaters, but it is currently in streaming platforms. If you want to watch it and you have Paramount Plus, you can go watch it right now. Without Paramount Plus, you'd have to rent it from a different streaming platform. But go on and enjoy it. Tell me what you think.